Welcome to Week 4 lecture video entitled Facilitating Discussion, a part of our Psych 5342 course, Teaching Psychology, with information based on McKeachie's Teaching Tips, 14th edition, Chapter 5. Discussion questions are a part of active learning. Active learning is defined as paying attention to relevant information, organizing it into coherent mental representations, and integrating representations with other knowledge. The prototypic teaching method for fostering active learning has always been discussion. Here are several benefits for the discussion techniques that we will implement in our online class. Number 1, learn to think in depth about student matter. The students are able to take the information that they have learned, they have read, and they're able to think deeply about it in order to answer the questions that are presented before them in the classroom. Students are able to evaluate the logic of and the evidence for their own and others' positions. And they're also given the opportunity to formulate applications of principles taught. Number 4, discussion techniques allows the student to develop motivation for further learning, as well as being able to articulate what they have learned, and they are able to receive prompt feedback on their own understanding or misunderstanding. Instructors and students alike are able to take advantage of the impact that social interaction has on learning and behavior. So what are the tasks that an instructor must complete in order to help the student be successful in their discussion question answering? Number 1, the instructor must help the student prepare for discussion. This is done by the assigned reading material that is given to the students that will help them to understand and adequately answer every question that is presented on the discussion board. Number 2, the instructor must get and maintain participation in the discussion. This is usually done by instructions and parameters and guidelines and a rubric that will allow the student to understand that their participation in the discussion is a graded effort. Number 3, facilitating the discussion in a way that progress is made. Giving the students a timeline of the first time they are to interact on the discussion board, and then giving them another date of when they should come back and interact with their students, with their peers. And so facilitating a timeline or given a timeline to facilitate discussion will allow the progression of the discussion to be evident and to take place. Number 4, helping students learn and practice the process of civil discourse. Again, in an online setting, this is usually done by parameters and guidelines and just giving information that will allow the students to understand that this is a safe place to express ideas and that this is a learning environment. Again, it will give progression in an online setting that will help every student voice to be heard, as well as to demonstrate what they have learned from the content that they have read. There are several different types of discussion posts that you can use in creating your own discussion questions. The first type is to start the discussion with a common experience. This could be relevant to news, this could be relevant to what is happening in the field. Any type of way that you can create or express a common experience, you can use that as a springboard that will now allow the students to discuss or to interact with your questions based on an experience that every student has as a student or even as someone in the field. Number 2, you can start your discussion with a controversy. Maybe this is a theory. Maybe this is a gap in literature that you want to present before your students and have the discussion around the controversy of the topic. Number 3, start your discussion with questions. And we have several types of questions that will be briefly mentioned here, but you're welcome to read in greater detail in our textbook. The first type of question is factual questions. This could be about the theories presented in psychology or the principles of learning. They are very factual questions. The who and the what and the why and the implications, very factual in nature, that will get your student to understand the basic premise of every theory presented in the context or in the content of psychology. The second type of question is application and interpretation questions. Again, this is information that is geared towards the theory. A good place to look for these type of questions could be in the goals set within each section of the chapter that will allow the student to think more deeply about the concepts that are being presented. Number 3, connective and causal effect questions. Again, this is an opportunity for you as the instructor to make real-world connections between the theory and life. Number 4, comparative questions. Comparative questions are questions that will ask the student to compare two types of theories, or to compare how this theory in psychology picked up where the other theory left off. Or this question could ask about how this theory completely went against the ideas of another theory that was stated and why things were changed, and now the current theory is what we hold on to. Number 5, evaluative questions. This is where you're asking the student to make a judgment about a theory and how this theory would take place in our real world, in our current state of thinking, maybe with infusing of technology. So how would this theory, how does it apply to this system that we have in place with the infusion of technology, and understanding if the application of the theory is still relevant to today's time. And the last type of question are critical questions. Again, these questions develop deeper meaning into the theory that is being presented, deeper understanding of the concept that is being relayed. These are all types of questions that you can use in creating your own questions on your discussion board in your online class. There are also additional ways of typing your discussion questions or having your questions presented for your online class. Another type is to start your discussion with a problem or a case. In presenting discussion questions with a problem or a case, there are several things to remember as the instructor. Number 1, it is better to be open-minded, curious questioner than the fountain of all knowledge. Allow the students to organically come to a conclusion about the questions that they have been asked and the answers that they are giving. As an instructor, it may not be a wise idea to go into the discussion board and immediately reveal the answers to the questions that you have posed. Perhaps a better approach would be to ask another question that will allow the students to come up with different understanding or a more rich knowledge to be demonstrated on the discussion board. As an instructor, don't be afraid to express your own curiosity or question by asking what if as a sentence or as a question stem for the discussion board. What if this happens today? What if this would translate into a different country or a different state? And so allowing your students to see your own thinking about the questions that are being asked will now cause a heightened sense of curiosity for your students to share more information based on your own curious questions that you are asking to release the class into their hands for academic discourse. As you are presenting a discussion question with a problem or a case, it may be easier to break the problem into subproblems. Perhaps you can ask a clarifying question or ask the students to clarify what exactly you mean by the problem that is being stated. Clarify the problem. A wonderful opportunity for your students to draw meaning from what you are initially asking of them. Another way of breaking the problem into subproblems is to clarify the task. What do you want them to know and what data is relevant? Perhaps you can move them in a direction of finding data that is relevant to the problem and asking them what do they already know. In the K-12 setting, this would look like a KWL chart, which is a what do you already know about the problem? What would you like to know about the problem? What do you want to know about the problem? KWL. In this sense, you're able to further along the discussion by breaking the problem into subproblems. Another factor to consider is characteristics of an acceptable solution. This is where your rubric would take place. This is where your rubric has meaning. This is where you can add value to the type of answers that you are expecting. Give out the points, the key points for them to include in their discussion questions as they are compiling their own posts to put into the discussion board forum. What are some possible solutions? Again, this is all parameters that you would add and give to the student to aid them in becoming successful in answering your questions in a way that is satisfactory for you as the instructor. Breaking the problem into subproblems also allows the student to evaluate the solutions against the criteria for a solution. So as you are giving them these hints and things to consider for their own question, once they begin to post questions, they can now mirror or they can compare their questions with what everyone else has stated, as well as comparing their answers to how it should look as far as the rubric of what you are looking for in their answers. So how do you move things along past the initial posting of your question on the discussion board? Number one, set discussion behavior norms. So the question may be, how do you set discussion behavior norms in an online setting? It's easier to do in a face-to-face setting, but in an online setting, what does that look like? This is the part where you would have in to be respectful and to be mindful of each other's perspectives. This comes directly from the instructor in setting those guidelines that the students will read and adhere to. Because we are in a tech-savvy generation, another way of moving your discussions along is to acknowledge and honor all perspectives. As an instructor, please interact with those comments, with the feedback. Please interact with the discussion board by first acknowledging and honoring perspectives one by one, giving time and consideration to every voice that has been represented on your discussion board. And so that means there must be a timely interaction. Every day, you should go in as the instructor to monitor the discussion board forum as well as interact. This timely interaction creates an instructor presence that will also reinforce the discussion behavior norms. As you are thinking of your discussion questions to post for your students to respond to, think about a few other things in formulating your questions. What skills do you want your students to learn? Is it communication skills? Is it being able to practice the articulation of the skills that they have learned or the information that they have learned within the text? Is it to learn how to be respectful? Is it to have a multicultural or a multi-perspective outlook about the information that has been presented before them in their textbook? What skill do you want your students to learn? Number 2, what is the value of what they have learned and the purpose of what they have learned, and how will it be demonstrated in their discussion post? Number 3, are you asking students how to formulate their responses and to respond to their peers? Perhaps for this one, you can provide an exemplar. You can provide the rubric, highlight the information from the rubric of what you are looking for a well-constructed response and what you are looking for in a follow-up response to their peers. Again, as the instructor, your role is to guide your students towards success. Number 4, learn to build on peers' ideas to increase motivation, engagement, and interaction. Tell the students how you want them to respond to their peers with the idea of increasing motivation, increasing engagement, increasing interaction. Number 5, evaluation of the material and to learn sensitivity to their peers' feelings. Again, this is where those discussion behavior norms are reinforced, where the students are reminded of what is expected and the grade that they will receive by the depth of understanding that they display from the reading of the material that you have assigned to them within the course. And other benefits of the discussion, as we know, it allows the students to practice what they have learned in writing. If they're able to write it in such a way that it is understandable by others, it is a sure sign that they have learned the material. And we know that because of this online engagement, it facilitates cooperative learning. As the instructor, this is the whole premise of facilitating discussion. It is to make sure that your students are learning the material, they are interacting with others, and they see the value of the content of what they have read, and they're able to articulate it in such a way that is beneficial to the online learning community.